The room smelled like polished wood and expensive cologne, the kind of scent people use when they want to feel powerful. The signing table sat in the center of the conference room, a slab of dark walnut so glossy it reflected everyone's faces back at them. I took my seat quietly, smoothing my blazer, keeping my posture relaxed. No one there suspected what I already knew. My brother sat across from me, legs spread wide, elbows resting on the table like he owned it. He had that familiar smirk on his face, the one he'd worn our entire childhood whenever he thought he was winning. The same smirk he'd worn when our parents praised him for things I had done first. The same one he wore now. He laughed too loudly and looked around the room at the lawyers, the consultants, the junior partners waiting along the walls. "Well," he said, tapping the stack of papers in front of him, "looks like it's official. I'm the new boss now." A couple of people chuckled politely. Then he turned his eyes toward me and added, casually cruel, "And you? You're just the help." The words landed exactly where he wanted them to. I smiled. Not a tight smile, not an angry one, a calm, polite smile, the kind that makes people underestimate you. If he noticed, he didn't care. He leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the moment. This was his victory lap. The end of a long campaign he thought he'd finally won. The truth was, he'd been preparing for this moment for years. So had I. Growing up, he was always the loud one. The one who announced his plans before they existed. The one who told people what he would do while I quietly did the work. Our parents called him confident. They called me careful. Somehow, confidence always sounded better. When he dropped out of college to build something real, everyone applauded his courage. When I stayed, finished my degree, and kept my head down, it was expected. When his first business failed, it was bad luck. When mine succeeded quietly in the background, it was nice, but temporary. I learned early that in our family, volume mattered more than results. So I stopped competing out loud. I built things without telling him. I invested without bragging. I listened more than I spoke. And when opportunities came my way, I took them silently. This meeting, the one he thought was about his partnership, was just another example. The documents in front of him looked official. His name was printed in bold letters. The company logo sat proudly at the top of each page. He had rehearsed his lines. He had already decided how this story would be told later. He would say he walked into a room and took control. He would say he earned it. He would never mention me. The lead attorney cleared his throat. "If everyone is ready, we'll begin final signatures." My brother nodded eagerly. "Let's do it." As pens were passed around the table, he leaned toward the attorney and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Just make sure the structure reflects that I'm running operations now. I don't want confusion." The attorney glanced at me, just for a fraction of a second. I met his eyes and gave the smallest nod. My brother missed it completely. He signed with a flourish, the way people do when they want their signature to be remembered. When he finished, he pushed the papers forward and crossed his arms, satisfied. "Your turn," he said to me, smug. "Try to keep up." I picked up the pen slowly. As I did, I thought about the night, weeks earlier, when I sat alone at my kitchen table reviewing financial statements he'd never bothered to read. I remembered the quiet phone call with my legal advisor. The pause on the other end of the line when I said his company's name. The way the tone shifted when ownership percentages were mentioned. I remembered being asked one simple question: "Do you want to remain anonymous, or do you want this handled directly?" I'd chosen directly. I signed my name. The pen clicked softly as I set it down. My brother leaned forward, scanning the page for a moment. Then he laughed. "See? Easy. Guess we're done here." "Not quite," the attorney said calmly. My brother frowned. "What do you mean?" The attorney slid a different folder across the table, one my brother hadn't seen yet. "Before we conclude, there's an additional item we need to address." The room went quiet. My brother looked confused, then irritated. "Additional item? We didn't discuss anything else." "No," the attorney replied, "you didn't." I folded my hands together and leaned back in my chair, still smiling. For the first time, my brother looked directly at me, not with arrogance, not with mockery, but with uncertainty. "What's this?" he asked, tapping the new folder. The attorney didn't answer him. He looked at me and said, "Would you like to explain, or shall I?" I met my brother's eyes fully now. The smirk on his face was gone. "Go ahead," I said softly. "You explain." And just like that, the balance in the room shifted. The attorney opened the folder slowly, deliberately, as if each second mattered. The sound of paper sliding against paper felt louder than it should have. My brother watched him with growing irritation, then glanced at me again. "What is this?" he snapped. "If there's an issue, say it." The attorney adjusted his glasses. "This isn't an issue. It's a clarification." "A clarification of what?" my brother asked. "Ownership," the attorney replied. That word hit him wrong. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened. "Ownership's already settled," he said. "That's why we're here." "Actually," the attorney said, calm but firm, "that's why we weren't done." He turned the folder so it faced the table. At the top of the page, bold and unmistakable, was the company's cap table, something my brother had never bothered to study in detail. Percentages, dates, legal entities. My brother leaned forward, squinting. "Why is my name?" He stopped mid-sentence. His finger hovered over the page. Next to his name was a number smaller than he expected. Much smaller. "What is this?" he said again, but this time his voice had changed. The attorney didn't rush. "This document reflects the current controlling interest of the company." My brother laughed once, sharp and forced. "That's wrong." "It isn't," the attorney said. My brother looked at me now, truly looked, as if trying to solve a puzzle he didn't know existed. "What did you do?" I didn't answer immediately. I let him sit with it. Weeks earlier, when he'd called me with his big news, how he'd finally landed a serious partnership, I'd congratulated him sincerely. I'd asked questions, listened carefully, let him talk. He never asked me anything in return. He never wondered why the deal moved so quickly. He never asked who had quietly guaranteed the capital behind it. He never noticed the clauses he'd skimmed past, assuming they were standard. Because he never imagined I'd be important enough to matter. The attorney continued, "Several weeks ago, the majority shares were acquired through a holding entity. That acquisition triggered a shift in operational authority." My brother's voice rose. "By who?" The attorney looked at me again. Every face in the room followed. "I did," I said calmly. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, like the room itself had stopped breathing. My brother shook his head. "No, that's not funny. I'm not joking," I replied. "You don't have that kind of money," he said quickly. "You never did." "I do now," I said. "And I have for a while." The attorney slid another document forward. "The acquisition was completed legally and verified. All filings are in order." My brother stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You went behind my back." "I went ahead of you," I corrected. His face flushed red. "You sabotaged me." "No," I said evenly. "I invested." He turned to the attorney. "This is ridiculous. She can't just." "She can," the attorney interrupted. And she did. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs now. People avoided eye contact. A consultant shifted uncomfortably. One of the junior partners stared at the table, suddenly very interested in the wood grain. My brother's voice dropped. "Why?" It was the first real question he'd asked me all day. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back with controlled ease. "Because you never saw me as anything but background," I said. "And because you were perfectly happy to take credit for things you didn't understand." He scoffed. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said. "It makes me responsible." The attorney cleared his throat. "There's one more matter." My brother whirled back around. "What now?" "Operational authority," the attorney said. "Effective immediately, control transfers to the majority holder." My brother's breathing became shallow. Which means, the attorney said, choosing his words carefully, "that decisions regarding leadership, contracts, and staffing are no longer yours to make." My brother looked at me, eyes wide. "You wouldn't." I held his gaze. "I already did." The attorney slid the final document across the table. A termination notice. Not dramatic, not cruel, just formal. My brother stared at it as if it were written in a language he didn't understand. "You're firing me?" I shook my head slightly. "No." He looked almost hopeful for half a second. "I'm ending your role," I said. "There's a difference." His voice cracked. You can't do this in front of everyone. I smiled softly. You called me, the help, in front of everyone. The room was dead silent now. My brother's shoulders slumped, just a little. You planned this. Yes, I said, quietly. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Whatever argument he'd prepared for years suddenly had no place to land. The attorney gathered the documents. This meeting is concluded. People began standing, filing out awkwardly, avoiding my brother's eyes. The power he'd felt minutes earlier drained away with each footstep leaving the room. He remained standing there, alone. As I picked up my bag, he spoke one last time. You think this is over? I paused at the door and looked back at him. For you? I said calmly. It is. And then I walked out. The hallway outside the conference room felt brighter than it had when I'd walked in, as if the building itself had shifted. My heels echoed against the marble floor as I moved forward without rushing. Behind me, I could feel it, the collapse. Not loud, not explosive, just quiet disbelief settling into reality. By the time I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed. His name. I didn't answer. I stepped inside, pressed the button, and watched the doors close. That afternoon, the ripple spread faster than he expected. Emails went out. Calendars were updated. Access permissions changed. By the time he tried logging into the internal system, his credentials no longer worked. The company he'd bragged about running had locked him out without drama, without ceremony. Exactly the way real power operates. He tried again to call me. Then texted. We need to talk. You're making a huge mistake. You don't know what you're doing. I read them later that night, sitting on my couch, a glass of water untouched on the table beside me. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt done. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I always had. I walked past the reception desk, nodded to people who now looked at me differently, not with surprise, but with understanding. The attorney met me in my office shortly after. There may be backlash, he said. He'll try to spin this. I know, I replied. Let him. And he did. Within hours, messages circulated. Claims that I'd manipulated things. That I'd been secretive. That I'd betrayed family. The same old story, loud, emotional, designed to pull attention back where you wanted it. But facts don't bend to volume. The board didn't budge. The contracts didn't change. The signatures were still valid. By the end of the week, he was gone completely. His desk cleared. His name quietly removed from company materials. His authority reduced to memories and complaints no one needed to entertain. Our parents called me that weekend. They were confused, upset, hurt. How could you do this to him? They asked. I listened, patiently, the way I always had. Then I said, I didn't do anything to him. I stopped doing things for him. Silence followed. That was when I realized something important. They weren't angry because I'd taken something away. They were angry because I'd stopped carrying him. Life got quieter after that. No more emergency calls. No more, just one favor. No more being told to step aside so someone louder could feel important. My work continued. The company stabilized. Decisions were made without chaos attached to them. Weeks later, I heard through someone else that my brother had told people the story very differently. That he'd been pushed out. That he'd been undermined. He never mentioned the part where he underestimated me. I never corrected him. Some stories don't need rebuttals. They collapse under their own weight. One evening, months later, I passed the old conference room again. Another meeting. Another set of signatures. Another future being decided quietly. As I took my seat, I caught my reflection in the polished table, calm, steady, unbothered. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to his choices. I was simply living with mine. And that was the real ending. Not the firing, not the meeting, not the silence afterward, but the moment I realized I no longer needed his approval, his acknowledgement, or his downfall to move forward. He'd called himself the new boss at the signing table. I ended the meeting, and I walked away owning everything that actually mattered.